You've played the roles, met the expectations, and done everything right. So why does it feel like something's missing? Welcome to the Unwritten Woman, a space for the woman who knows she's more than the life she's been given. I'm Kristen, author of Unlocking Authenticity, a journey from people-pleasing to empowerment. And I know firsthand what it's like to break free from the mold and start rewriting your story. Here, we have real conversations about unlearning, unbecoming, and stepping into the fullness of who you are on your own terms. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of The Unwritten Woman. I'm your host, Kristen, and I am the author of Unlocking Authenticity, a journey from people-pleasing to empowerment. Yes, I identify as a recovering people pleaser. And last week, I really took the time to dive into and share how I identified the roots of my own people pleasing tendencies. And I also shared how I, and maybe many of us, have actually been trained, even without knowing it, we've actually been trained to equate love and acceptance with performance and actually self-abandonment. At this point, what I'd like to do in this episode is really focus on how that training that we tend to have as young children and young teenagers and, growing up, how that follows us into adulthood and what it actually looks like in our lives as adult women. Because the truth is, whether we acknowledge it or not, a lot of us, especially those of us who suffer with people-pleasing tendencies, we're really still living very performative lives, even today. And it's not just in one area of our life. It's in all aspects of our lives, right? From our friendships, from our relationships with our family members, into romantic relationships, into the workplace. Literally in every area of our lives, we're touching these tendencies. These tendencies show up in every aspect of our lives. The truth is that people-pleasing tendencies don't just stay with the child and then remain there. No, they follow us through every phase of our lives. The same way that little girl grows up, those people-pleasing tendencies grow up. And then it shapes how we move in our friendships. It shapes how we move in our romantic relationships. It shapes how we move in the workplace. And then here we are. We can barely recognize ourselves. We're living pretty miserably and we hold a lot of resentment, and it's just a snowball effect. So this episode is really about calling out that performative life. The truth is, if we're not addressing our performative life, we're actually going to become masters in living a performative life. And what that looks like is walking into a room and being able to sense and pick up exactly what's expected from us and morphing into that thing. We end up morphing into whatever version we believe people expect from us and need from us. And we no longer give ourselves permission or give ourselves space to just be. And so as we continue to morph into this different version of ourselves in every different space and every different aspect of our lives, we become less and less of who we actually are. But we're losing her. And then it gets to the point where we don't recognize her. So let's talk a little bit about what it actually looks like. So let's say in our friendships, it looks like being invited for brunch when we really don't feel like leaving the house, but we put on our makeup, we get dressed, we get there, and we really aren't enjoying ourselves. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, right? But there are times when I really just like to be by myself. And I just don't know how to say no. And so I'll be there and I'll be the first one there with a smile on my face, with my bells on. What about avoiding difficult conversations, right? Just because we want to keep the peace, right? Sometimes we have friends who we don't necessarily always agree with what they do and how they behave or what they say, right? But it's easier to just let them be and not call them out because we just want to keep the peace. Because if I if I have to talk about it and I have to have this difficult conversation, it could end up in an argument, and I really don't want to argue. So let me just not say anything and just leave it alone. But in reality, I really don't like how you behaved, or I don't like how that thing that you said to me, but I'm not going to say nothing because I'd rather keep the peace. Or you end up overextending yourself, right? Maybe, you're the type of person who, and it's not a bad thing to be the person that's going to give the last that you have, that's going to, give the shirt off of your back for somebody else to be okay and to not feel neglected or to not feel left out or to not feel, like they can't participate or whatever the situation may be, right? But there's no boundary there for yourself. And so now, instead of paying your light bill, you paid for brunch for two of your friends because they didn't have it. When in reality, you don't have it either because now your light's going to be cut off. But because we live our lives being performative and we have been trained to abandon ourselves or to put ourselves and our needs behind everybody else's, we literally believe in our minds that it's better for us to sacrifice ourselves than to prioritize ourselves. What about in romantic relationships? It's doing things that you don't necessarily want to do. Again, agreeing to certain standards or expectations within your relationship that you don't agree with, only because you don't want to seem like you're being difficult, only because you want to because you want to feel chosen. And so that means that in order for you to be chosen, you have to be this particular person. You have to do this particular thing. You have to meet this particular standard. And even though that doesn't really align with who you are, because you want to be chosen, you're willing to sacrifice your own values to meet this expectation. Dismissing your own needs and desires in that relationship and not speaking up for the things that are important to you that you desire from your partner because you don't want to feel like you're being too needy or you're too clingy or you're too this or whatever, right? Like you don't want to be categorized as something. And so instead of speaking up for yourself and saying, hey, this is what I need out of this relationship that I'm not getting, you rather just dismiss it to avoid any issues. You end up in a situation where you're putting this person's happiness before your own. Like, I just want you to be happy. Even if I'm miserable, as long as you're happy, I'm good. And that's not real. Again, it's not sustainable, right? And it's not realistic and it's not fair to you. And it's going to lead to a lot of resentment. It's going to lead to a lot of animosity. And it's going to create, even though you're trying to keep the peace, what you're really doing is creating a very toxic environment because you're not communicating what your needs are. You're not speaking up for yourself. You're doing things or you're accepting things that don't align with who you are and your values. And so you, unfortunately, end up being the person that's creating this toxic environment that you are at some point going to be frustrated with and want to exit. The truth is that it's okay to speak up for yourself. It's okay to say, hey, this is what I need in this relationship. Because, and this might be difficult, but the truth is, like, you kind of have to teach people how to show up for you. You got to explain to people how to love you. And in order for you to be able to do that, you kind of have to know for yourself too, right? You are responsible for communicating what your needs are, communicating what your expectations are and your desires, right? The person that wants to be with you is going to, that not only wants to be with you, but has a capacity to offer you the things that you desire and need in that relationship, is going to do it. But if you don't communicate that, they don't know. So let's talk about what performative life could look like in the workplace. And I feel like, especially in the workplace, especially as women, especially if you are a woman of color, like I am, you probably experience this more in the workplace than any other area of your life, because we got to get all the extra degrees and all the extra certifications so that we can compete. And so we're doing all the things. We're working harder. We're putting in more hours than everybody else. There's that whole narrative, right, that's already out there. But the truth is, for us as people pleasers, it becomes like it's amplified, because it's not just the narrative of being a woman in the workplace. It's not just the narrative of being a woman of color in the workplace. It's now the narrative of being a people pleasing woman of color in the workplace. So yeah, it's going to look like saying yes to every task that comes up, right? Because hey, there might be a promotion coming soon, and I need to be at the top of the list. And the only way I'm going to get to the top of the list is if I say yes and I have no boundaries, right? If that means that, oh, there's a 7 o'clock meeting, I'll be there. I can go. You know what I mean? Listen, I live in Central Standard Time. A lot of the people that I work with work in Eastern Standard Time. And sometimes there are meetings that get scheduled at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 7 a.m. my time. Oh, or what about, meetings that are happening that are abroad, or, international team members, right? And I am on a project, and that meeting is going to be at 11 o'clock at night on Sunday. Not Kristen. Not anymore. But in the past, a previous version of Kristen would have been like, oh, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's no big deal. I'll be there. I'll log in for that 11 o'clock p.m. meeting and be there, and I'll take notes and all of that. Not today. Not today. Not this version of Kristen, because it's not necessary, right? Because now I have boundaries. It looks like constantly overworking and over delivering. They ask for a report. You didn't drop 3 reports because you have and that's not what they asked for, but you're trying to prove something. I actually was coached by a manager a while back, maybe some years ago. And it was some really good feedback. It was some very good feedback. In the moment, I was like, it took me a minute to really understand how I could apply this, or what this meant, right? But the feedback was, just answer the question that's being asked. Because what I would do is somebody would ask me a question, and I would over explain, and I would go in on these long tangents about why that's the answer, and why, here's all the proof that this is the answer. And in addition to the answer, hey, you might also want to know X, Y, and Z. And I appreciated that feedback, but it let me know this was a perfect example of overperforming, over delivering, and literally doing too much. Why? Because I wanted to portray that I was intelligent. Well, your intelligence is like, you don't have to talk too much to be intelligent. It taught me a good lesson of like, girl, you don't have anything to prove. You don't have anything to prove. Your work already proves itself. You have already proven that you deserve to be where you are. And you've already proven the quality of work that you can deliver. So there's nothing else that needs to be explained. Chill out, girl. That's what I took from that. That's not what he said, but that's what I took from it. And it was a good lesson, and it helped me a lot. It actually helped me a lot with my own, coaching people that reported to me. It really helped me a lot. And so I say all that to say that you ain't got to do, you don't have to do all of that. You don't have to do all of that. The other thing too is like, seeing that there's a task that needs to be done is really somebody else's responsibility. But hey, you know what? You got extra time, and you don't really think that they're going to do a good job of it. So you're just going to go ahead and jump in and do it for them. Right. And hey, if somebody's offering to take something off your plate, you going to say no? No. So you, as a people pleaser, as the overachiever, what you're offering to do somebody else's work, they're not going to tell you no. They're not going to tell you no. So what happens? Now you're, again, overworking yourself, right? And taking on tasks that don't belong to you and aren't really your responsibility. Or how about this? How about when you actually get the nerve to start setting some boundaries? You get the nerve to start setting some boundaries, and now you feel guilty. And now you feel guilty because now you are trying to protect your peace. You're taking back your time, right? You're taking back your energy. And now you're riddled with guilt because that's not how it should be. Like, because you are a people pleaser. And so it is your responsibility to do all these things and overextend yourself and be on the clock at 6:30 and be there till 11 o'clock at night. So now when you start to set boundaries, right, in your life, there's going to be a point where as you're making that shift for yourself, you are going to start to feel like, ooh, this doesn't feel right. But it's a discomfort that you're going to have to be able to accept and be comfortable with because it's necessary for you to pull back. It's necessary for you to set healthy boundaries for yourself. And that's in the workplace, that's in your relationships, that's with your family, because that's going to be the first step to becoming the woman that you actually envision for yourself. You've gotten so comfortable in calling yourself a team player and being super ambitious. And so those are the terms that you use to disguise your people pleasing tendencies and your performative life that you're living. But in reality, being a team player is also knowing how to delegate. Being a team player is knowing who's responsible for what tasks and helping them along that path. Being ambitious is not overworking yourself. Being ambitious is setting goals and setting realistic and measurable goals so that you can achieve them and move forward, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean ambition does not require you to work 80-hour weeks. Ambition doesn't require you to work 60-hour weeks. So here's the thing about the performative life, right? When you are living a performative life, you are literally curating your words, your behavior, your demeanor. You're creating this persona, right? That you think people are going to accept and love and appreciate and value. And you become, again, less and less of who you actually are. And you're doing these things, you're making these adjustments depending on who you're around, right? So you're literally creating all these different versions of yourself, right? There's not the real you and then the performative you. There's the you that shows up to the office. There's the you that shows up to church. There's the you that shows up with this circle of friends, and then a different you that shows up with this circle of friends. And then there's the you that shows up in your marriage or in your romantic relationship, whatever it is, right? There's so many different versions of you based on who you're dealing with because you're crafting this persona, you're crafting this character that is not you. You're constantly suppressing yourself, suppressing your opinions and your beliefs and what you feel strongly about. Sometimes you get to a point where you don't even really know what you feel strongly about, right? But that's so that you don't ruffle anybody's feathers and you are amiable and you're not disappointing people and you're doing the best you can to not be offensive, right? And again, you're becoming less and less of yourself. And in reality, I'm not even going to hold you. Like, the truth is, there have been times where even in this, like in this performative life that I was living, somehow people would still be offended. People will still be disappointed. People still have something to say. People still have something to say. I'm being less of who I am, and people still have something to say about it. And none of those people are adjusting who they are to make me comfortable. And it's like, why am I trying so hard to make everyone else comfortable and what I think makes them comfortable? When one, they still have something to say. They're still an issue. And two, they're not making the same accommodations that I'm making to make me comfortable. And when I realized like everybody else is living in their truth, and I'm the one that's here curating this persona or this character based on what I think is going to make people happy, and it still doesn't make them happy. Because my people pleasing tendencies in my performative life was based on what I thought people would appreciate, or what I thought people would value, or what I thought people would love about me. And they didn't. The day that I started living in my full truth was the day that I started feeling the most amount of love in my life. So when you're living a performative life, right, there are three things that happen. One is you begin to curate your words, and you are morphing into this version of you that you believe makes people around you very comfortable. And you're creating these different personas based on who you're around, whether that be with your family, this group of friends, that group of friends, in the workplace, in your romantic relationship or your marriage, whatever, right? You're creating all these different mini versions of you that aren't real, and it's all based on who you're with in the moment. The second thing that we do is we suppress our opinions. We downplay what we feel and what we believe, because we really don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to disappoint anyone. And so we are shrinking ourselves and what we feel and what we believe to, again, make other people feel comfortable. And then the third thing that we do is we become hyper focused on managing other people's emotions or opinions about us, right? So we're trying to control how people perceive us. In reality, it's safer to be liked than it is to be honest. It's safer to be liked than it is to be seen. And so in our performative lives, we're creating these mini versions of us that aren't real. We are suppressing how we feel. We are trying to manage other people's perceptions, and it's unsustainable. And one or two things is going to happen. You're either going to fall apart, and the real you is going to finally break free, and it's going to be in a very dramatic and traumatic, episode, or you're going to completely lose sight of who you actually are, and she's going to be far gone before you know it. So here's what I want you to reflect on, because as you know, if not every episode, there's going to be several episodes here where there's going to be some reflection. So I hope you have your journal and your pen ready, because I've got some questions for you. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to understand that this is not the time to fix. This is really just about acknowledging, noticing, learning about yourself in your current state. The first question that I want you to think about is, where in my life am I still performing to be accepted? The second question is, in what friendships or relationships am I afraid to speak my full truth? And the third question is, how do I measure my worth at work? Is it tied to my performance or my productivity? The truth is that people-pleasing tendencies, living a performative life, there's a real process to making that change in your life, right? And so that's really part of why I launched this podcast, is because I think, my experience in transforming my own life, I could have used a guide and I could have used a little bit of like help along the way. My goal here is that no one that's going through this journey is doing it alone, right? And that you recognize that you are not the only person that's dealing with this, right? Or you're not the only person that is trying to figure out who they are at 40 years old, right? We are in some way, form, or fashion trying to figure it out. And what I want you to know is that you're not alone in any of it. And as you're going through this journey, don't rush through this process. Take the time that you need. Really be reflective. Make this time very meaningful for yourself, and know that you are supported and that you're seen and that as you are loved. And I really believe that as we're going through this journey together, very quickly you'll start to feel a sense of relief, because even though you're still going through this journey and you're still going through this process, that relief is going to come from knowing that it's possible. And I can say that it's possible because I've been through it, and I know I'm not the first to transform my life, as a recovering people pleaser, right? And I'm not going to be the last, right? But what was really important to me is that whoever is experiencing the things that I've experienced can go through this journey and feel supported and feel loved and cared for and feel seen. I appreciate you for listening here and subscribing to this channel. I encourage you, if you want to take this journey seriously, to purchase Unlocking Authenticity, A Journey from People Pleasing to Empowerment. It's available on barnesandnoble.com. And there's the hard copy that you can purchase and have it shipped to your home, or you can also download the ebook that's available. If you have any questions, if you want to share your experience, if you want to share your feedback, drop it in the comments below. You can also reach me via email at theunwrittenwoman@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you have, feel free to share them, because I would love to talk about those questions on another episode. So I just really am excited to hear from you. I'm excited to continue this journey with you all. And this is the halfway point of season 1. So I'm really excited about that. And I just am excited to see where this journey takes us. That is it for episode 5, and I will see you next week. If today's episode spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Let's keep this conversation going. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And if something in this episode made you think, feel, or reflect, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment, send me a DM, or even share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And who knows, your comment or question might just inspire a future episode. Because this space isn't just about me, it's about us rewriting our stories together. So let me know, what's on your mind? What part of your life feels unwritten? I can't wait to hear from you.